Sometimes, the people who make the greatest impact in God's plan are not always the ones standing in the spotlight. Some quietly protect, some faithfully worship, some courageously lead, and some spend their entire lives serving God, even through seasons of triumph, disappointment, and discipline. One such person was Miriam. She was the sister of Moses and Aaron, one of the first women in the Bible to be called a prophetess, and a key figure in Israel's journey from slavery to freedom. Her story is one of courage, faith, leadership, failure, and God's mercy. Let's begin. The story of Miriam begins in Egypt during one of the darkest periods in Israel's history. The descendants of Jacob had grown into a great nation while living in Egypt. A new pharaoh came to power who feared the Israelites because they had become so numerous. He worried that if war broke out, the Israelites might join Egypt's enemies and overthrow the kingdom. To weaken them, Pharaoh forced the Israelites into slavery. They worked under harsh conditions, building cities and carrying heavy loads day after day. Yet despite their suffering, the Israelites continued to grow in number. Pharaoh then gave a cruel command. Every Hebrew baby boy that was born was to be thrown into the Nile River. Only the baby girls were allowed to live. Around this time, a Levite woman gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. She hid him for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she carefully placed him inside a basket coated with tar to make it waterproof. She set the basket among the reeds along the bank of the Nile River. Standing nearby was the baby's older sister. Her name was Miriam. She watched from a distance, determined to see what would happen to her little brother. Soon Pharaoh's daughter came down to the river to bathe. She noticed the basket among the reeds and asked one of her servants to bring it to her. When she opened it, she saw the baby crying. Immediately she realized he was one of the Hebrew children. Her heart was filled with compassion. At that moment, young Miriam stepped forward with remarkable courage. She asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and find one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" Pharaoh's daughter agreed. Miriam hurried home and brought back the baby's own mother. Without realizing it, Pharaoh's daughter had hired the child's own mother to care for him until he was old enough to live in the palace. When the child grew older, he was taken to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son. She named him Moses because she had drawn him out of the water. Years passed. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace, but after killing an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew slave, he fled into the wilderness of Midian. For 40 years he lived there as a shepherd. Then one day, God appeared to Moses in a burning bush. God called him to return to Egypt and lead the Israelites out of slavery. Moses was afraid. He questioned his own ability to speak before Pharaoh. God reassured him that his brother Aaron would help him. Together, Moses and Aaron returned to Egypt. Although the Bible doesn't describe every detail of Miriam's life during this period, she was there as God performed mighty signs and wonders through Moses and Aaron. She witnessed the 10 devastating plagues that struck Egypt. She saw Pharaoh finally release the Israelites after the death of the firstborn. She watched as thousands of Israelites began their journey toward freedom. Soon they reached the edge of the Red Sea. Behind them, Pharaoh had changed his mind. The Egyptian army was approaching rapidly with horses and chariots. The Israelites were trapped. The sea stretched before them. The army stood behind them. Fear spread throughout the camp. Then God instructed Moses to stretch out his staff over the sea. A strong east wind blew throughout the night. The waters divided. Walls of water stood on both sides, while a dry path appeared through the middle. The Israelites walked safely across. When the Egyptian army pursued them, God caused the waters to return. The sea closed over Pharaoh's army, and not one soldier survived. The Israelites stood safely on the opposite shore. Their years of slavery were finally over. In that unforgettable moment, Miriam stepped forward. The Bible calls her Miriam the prophetess. She took a tambourine in her hand. All the women followed her with tambourines and dancing. Together they sang, "Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Both horse and driver he has hurled into the sea." It was one of the first great worship celebrations recorded in the Bible. Miriam led the women of Israel in praising God for his miraculous deliverance. As the Israelites continued their journey through the wilderness, Miriam remained one of the nation's leaders alongside Moses and Aaron. The prophet Micah later recorded God's words saying, "I sent Moses to lead you, also Aaron and Miriam." This shows that Miriam held an important place among God's chosen leaders. She helped encourage and guide the people during one of the most significant periods in Israel's history. But like every human being in Scripture except Jesus, Miriam was not perfect. As the years passed, Moses married a Cushite woman. At some point, Miriam and Aaron began speaking against Moses because of his wife. Their criticism soon revealed a deeper issue. They said, "Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he also spoken through us?" Their words reflected pride and jealousy. They questioned the unique role God had given Moses. The Lord heard everything. God immediately called Moses, Aaron, and Miriam to the entrance of the tent of meeting. A pillar of cloud descended as the Lord spoke to them. God explained that while he revealed himself to prophets through visions and dreams, Moses was different. God spoke with Moses face to face. He entrusted Moses with leading his people in a unique way. Then God asked Aaron and Miriam, "Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" When the cloud lifted, Miriam was suddenly covered with leprosy. Her skin became white like snow. Aaron immediately realized what had happened. He turned to Moses and pleaded, "My Lord, please do not hold against us the sin we have so foolishly committed." Moses did not seek revenge. Instead, he immediately cried out to God, "O God, please heal her." God instructed that Miriam be shut outside the camp for 7 days before being welcomed back. The Israelites did something remarkable. They refused to continue their journey until Miriam returned. The entire nation waited. After 7 days, Miriam was healed and restored to the camp. The journey then continued toward the Promised Land. Many years later, after nearly 40 years in the wilderness, the Israelites arrived in the wilderness of Zin. It was there that Miriam died. She was buried at Kadesh. Not long after her death, the people found themselves without water. Many Bible scholars have noted that Miriam's death marked the end of an important chapter in Israel's history. She had witnessed nearly every major event of the Exodus. She had protected Moses as a baby. She had celebrated God's victory at the Red Sea. She had helped lead the nation through the wilderness. And though she experienced God's discipline, she also experienced his forgiveness and restoration. Her life reminds us that God can use ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary purposes. What can we learn from Miriam's story? First, courage can change history. As a young girl, Miriam bravely approached Pharaoh's daughter, helping save the life of the very man God would later use to deliver Israel. Second, worship should always follow God's faithfulness. After crossing the Red Sea, Miriam led the people in praising God instead of taking credit for the victory. Third, leadership requires humility. Miriam's moment of pride reminds us that every gift and position we have comes from God and should never become a reason for jealousy or comparison. Finally, God's discipline is never without purpose. Although Miriam faced consequences for her actions, God also restored her, demonstrating both his justice and his mercy. The story of Miriam is ultimately a story of faithful service. She was a protector, a worship leader, a prophetess, a leader of God's people. Though she was not perfect, God used her life to shape the history of Israel and prepare the way for his unfolding plan of redemption. If Miriam's story encouraged you, remember this: never underestimate the role God has given you. Whether your calling is to lead, to serve, to encourage, or simply to remain faithful where he has placed you, God can use your obedience to accomplish things far greater than you can imagine. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this Bible story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Minted Soul, and share it with someone who wants to learn more about the incredible people of the Bible. Until next time, may God bless you, strengthen you, and fill your heart with his peace.